Hello and welcome back to Vegas October 1 Sounds. Tonight I'm going to give a brief introduction to how I approach researching gunshot acoustics from the tragedy of October 1. And basically, I start out by gathering as much theory as I can about gunshot acoustics. And boy, there is plenty of it out there. There are thousands of papers, there are thousands of patents, there's dozens of books ranging from everything from complex fluid dynamics to simple articles by, gun groups. And so that there is a vast wealth of information, and for anybody who wants to go research it, it's as simple as type in a research to, say, people like Robert Mayer from Montana State University, or doing forensic gunshot acoustics, or doing muzzle blasts or supersonic shockwave, or any of these key terms that you'll hear in my videos. And it takes a while to wrap your mind around what's being said, because most of the papers are presented by people like myself who are electrical engineers, and we speak a different language, and we speak in terms which tend to be fairly precise, and we craft our words carefully, and we write up papers very carefully. Now, my videos aren't going to be as rigorous, simply because I don't have the time to produce them and review them ad infinitum to make them exact and precise. But I'll do my best to stay on track and be accurate. And so the first rule of thumb after I've gotten the theory mastered is to observe, observe, observe. What patterns do I see? What can I measure? And I measure, measure, measure. And my favorite tool is Sonic Visualizer. I use it daily. And with Sonic Visualizer, I'm not left with just depending upon my ears to hear anything. And Sonic Visualizer is a tool that allows you to import into it videos or audios. Either way, it's going to result in an audio. And from that audio, you can look at waveforms, which are time domain plots, or you can look at fast Fourier transforms, which are spectral analysis of the content, or you can look at the powers, or you can look at a whole host of things that the tool has to offer. And the unique thing about Sonic Visualizer is you can look at it in as fine as detail as you want, down to the very individual samples that are in the audio, or you can look at the big picture all at once. But somewhere in between there's going to be a region where you can extract real good information. So after you observe, 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 and I look for patterns and I measure, 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 then I start forming hypotheses as to what I'm seeing. And I go back and I look at what the theory predicts, and then I start putting the picture together. And that's kind of a holistic approach, in that you have the big picture, you have the small picture, you see where they match, you see where they don't, you reject outliers, and you come up with a few conclusions. There are a couple other different ways to approach it also. What I call the forward predictive method, which is where you write a simulation program based upon the theory, and you set that simulation program up with the parameters that were present there in Vegas. You run it, and you see what the predictions of that program are, and then you compare it to what you again measured. So not only do you have the well-accepted industry theories, but now you have a model based upon those theories that predicts what the outcome of those gunshots and what the gunshot acoustics look like, sound like, and operate it. And so that's the forward predictive model, I call it. And through all of this, you look at what you've done, you refine it, you repeat it, you observe some more until it's a well-oiled machine, and everything is, as my dad would say, copacetic and agrees. I use lots of graphs, I use lots of statistics, I use lots of tools, And I've developed software tools using Python and all the ecosystem or libraries surrounding it to aid me in this process. I've collected tens of thousands of data points. I've collected hundreds of thousands of points which have been rejected as not related to gunshot activity. And I've developed a deep understanding of not only gunshot acoustics, but what was going on that night, what people were hearing, why they were hearing it, why certain theories are unacceptable because they're at odds with the accepted theory and the observations. Why there's misinterpretations, why people believe they hear helicopters when they're really just hearing the muzzle blast from the gun at a distance. And all these things I wrap together and I put into these videos so that you, the listener, can have the benefit of my research. So basically, I never trust one video with one sound, or inversely, I never trust one sound from one video as telling me anything except that I might have a point of interest to research. If I can't confirm that one sound from one video with a dozen other videos, then I don't have a case. And so in particular, here's one that has bothered me recently. When I first started, I listened to the Tall Ace of Spades that covered the first shots, and actually it covered nearly every volley after that word. It was a tape which he was walking most of the time, and so it has these walking sounds all throughout it, which kind of made it a little tricky at points. He's facing this way, he's facing that way, he's moving, he's going closer, he's going further away, and all these things make the Tall Ace of Spades not one of my favorite. But in looking closely at the tape, I saw what I thought were gunshots, and that occurred immediately before volley one. And I said, whoa, nobody's talking about these. And so I looked at them, and I looked for videos that were around that area that could corroborate, and I looked very deeply at them, and I concluded that these were anomalies related to that camera at that location, and that they were unrelated to any actual gunshots that occurred. And that issue has come back up recently in one channel, and I will be addressing it in a further video. Also, if you go way back to the very start of that video, in the low frequency region, you hear these noises, and if you listen really, really carefully, it sounds like helicopters. And that puzzled me for the longest of time, because it's all throughout the video. And I said, well, it can't be the sound of motor cars, engines, because there's not really motor cars at every location. It can't be the sound of walking, because that would be a different frequency and duration. It can't be gunshots, because there's no gunshots throughout the whole 15 minutes of the video. And then somebody finally discovered what it was, not me. It was a defect in the GoPro camera that was being used that caused oscillations relating to something in the Wi-Fi. And so that one finally thing. But that's the type of process you have to go through sometimes to figure out what's really going on, because sounds aren't always concrete. They never always present the way that the theory says, because reality is so messy that sometimes it's a little bit ambiguous. And that's why I insist on having multiple videos with multiple observations to corroborate what I see in one. So I may throw out, a couple of shots here and there, but it's not, it's not a common occurrence. For example, still on my list of things to investigate are a couple single shots, or a couple of percussive sounds. Percussive sound is nothing more than something that sounds like a gunshot. It can be produced by a drum, it can be produced by a rock hitting a wall, it can be produced by you hitting your phone on something hard, it can be produced by a firecracker, an explosion, a a host of things. And that single event you have to look at very, very closely. You have to look at the context in which it occurs, and you have to make some determination as to what it is. So in the Corey Langdon video, the taxi driver, she eventually works her way around to the back side of the venue over near, I think that's Alibaba Street there. You'd think I'd know by now just by heart, but I don't look at the videos. I look at the audio from the videos, so my knowledge sometime of the video part is lacking. But anyway, as she drives through that area, there's one section of it where the camera is looking towards the Luxor, and it's looking through a window, and you hear a snap, which sounds a lot like the supersonic crack from a supersonic projectile. And in the video, you can see the light on the Luxor blur, and you can see a couple of reflections blur, and you can easily determine that either the camera or the window was being shaken. So then the question immediately becomes, well, was that a sound from a gunshot that was loud enough, because the windows were rolled up by that time in the taxi, to shake both the window because the light from the Luxor was, blurred, or the camera? And that's still one that I've yet to explain, but I've been unable to find other videos which corroborate that sound at that time. Doesn't mean they don't exist, but I've certainly gone through 50 or more videos looking for it and have yet to find it. So it's still on my list to investigate. It's a possible single gunshot. But, who knows where that research will end up. So anyway, I frown upon research that says I've got a video and in there's a sound, and this is the sound of a gunshot. Because I'm telling you, no one using just their ears can tell for sure that that's a gunshot. No one. And particularly when it's just one shot. Now, if you have a string of 50 of them, the probability of misclassifying them is pretty low. But then again, there are things that sound like those that you have to look at the duration of the signal, because gunshots, both the muzzle blast and the sonic shock waves, have a very defined frequency and duration. And so if those frequencies and durations aren't present in those impulse sounds, then you have to look to something else that's producing the sound. So anyway, that's enough of the weeds. In doing my research on this stuff, I'm very careful. I try to be as precise as I can with the measurements. I try to be as precise as I can with presenting the theory, and I try to be as conservative as I can in making conclusions. And where I stray from that conservativeness, I will tell you straight up, this is a conjecture or this is a belief. I don't have corroborating evidence, but there it is. In fact, I did one video on the from the Bitsko camera, where people asked how many shots did, I believe his name is McDonald, fire, quote unquote, accidentally in the room right after the second breach occurred, the breach that opened up the door between room 134 and 135. Now, I don't have any other videos that contain audio of sufficient quality to look at that. So the Bitsko cam is pretty much my only source. And in this case, I looked at it and I said, I believe there are 3 shots fired, and this is why I believe it. And then my commenters came back and said, look, we don't really understand what you're saying, and we don't see what you're seeing. So then I took and I applied some algorithms which removed the reverberation and echoing, so that I could get a very semi-clean time domain plot, the waveform plots where you have amplitude plotted over time. And everybody could see that waveform, and then there were 7 or 8 or 9 events in that short duration to look at, And I looked at that and I said, okay, these are the primary events and these are echoes, and there's a couple that were rejected as being primary events for a couple of different reasons. In that video I made it very clear this is the only video I have. These were the techniques I applied, and this, could be subject to interpretation otherwise, one way or the, there could have been 4 shots, but I believe there are 3, and I gave the reasons. So that's the way I approach this. So anyway, we'll catch you in the next video. And if you're a new subscriber or just visiting this place, for the second or third time, I hope you enjoy what I've presented. I hope it's educational, and I hope you find it enlightening. And that's it for this video, and we'll catch you in the next one.